There are some branches of science that you can rely on pretty absolutely in terms of what it is that those branches of science claim to be able to inform on and the manner in which they inform on those things. Example, particle physics. You can rely on that in terms of, do the predictions it makes come to fruition when we observe? And the answer is yes, better than any other branch of science that's ever been developed. You can rely on mathematics to produce the answer to a calculation that, according to the rules of mathematics, it must. It will do that, absolutely. If you think for 1 second that that's the same thing as making a prediction or a prognostic statement about the outcomes of something as so incomprehensibly complex as a human body over time, as it relates to any aspect of the diet, for example, if you think human nutrition science exists, I'm sorry, you've been taken in. It doesn't. All we can do is do the best compromise on actual science with human beings that is possible to do ethically, practically, and financially. What we cannot do is take sets of genetically identical, that is, human beings in pairs, a large number of those, for statistical power, lock them in laboratories for their entire life, controlling every aspect of their existence and experience of existence, except for that one thing we're going to moderate in their diet, for decades, if we want to talk about the results of so doing over decades. We cannot do that work. So we have to compromise. The problem is how far the compromise actually goes when you follow the rabbit hole in terms of nutrition science. It's an absolute ridiculous joke, basically, is what I'm telling
you. Is there one diet that you think that we all human beings should be doing to be healthy?
Right.
And I ask you in a way where, I mean, I think we all have listened to you, and you really have some great thoughts and ideas. My grandmother lived 104. She smoked Pall Malls, drank Manhattans, and was an Italian sort of Mediterranean eater. And one of my good friends, who was the healthiest guy in the world, exercised, dies of cancer at 52. And we looked at him and thought everything about him was healthy.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the question is about, do I have an opinion on the best diet for a human being? What is the species-appropriate, species-specific diet for a human being? Based on the anthropological evidence available to us, my answer to that question is absolutely I have an opinion. And absolutely my opinion is strongly that our entire development as a species over deep time, our entire evolutionary process, indicates that we have eaten almost nothing but the flesh and associated fat of large ruminant animals, very little of anything else. Which means those are the positive and negative selection pressures that have been at play. And ergo, those are the organ systems that are developed in us. Those are the things in us that are perpetuated through the generations. That's what's shaped us. So therefore, there's no reason to suspect that that's not the best thing to continue eating.
Are we just too good at hunting, and in the pressure that we basically created was a lower number or exclusion of many large animals, and now we're sort of forced to figure out what else we could eat in order to survive?
I guess at the end of the day, one of the things that makes human beings successful as a species that has survived various events that other species have not, well, it's multifaceted. First of all, we have intelligence. We can think problems through. We can be problem solvers. We can overcome adversity. Secondly, we can communicate with one another in a meaningful way using a language. Thirdly, we have opposing thumbs. We can fashion tools according to what we've taught each other about how to fashion these tools and how to use them. And then we can go forth and put together the strategy that we as a tribe have decided is the best way to get these woolly mammoth as our prey animals. Too easy. So what's this other small percentage of intake that wasn't that? Well, it was largely fibrous tubers which were boiled to within an inch of their lives for hours and hours and hours on end to loosen them up so that we could chew on the fibers that were left behind, almost no starch in them, basically. And we could then ferment some of those fibers in our gut, a very small amount of that, to produce some short-chain fatty acid as a subsistence thing. But that wasn't our design. That was just a thing that, because of our plant eating past some 5.5 million years ago, we still have some residual capacity to both break down starch using amylase a little bit, and we can also ferment a very small amount of fibers in our gut because there was no negative selection pressure to completely knock that out. Ergo, if the hunt isn't successful for large megafauna or whatever, then I guess we can go home and start digging up these roots and put them in a pot, can't we?
There is I always thought ultimately, it's all other organisms are dead and massive fire and things go through the world, and the plants and the microbes survive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a little bit like we think about the viruses that insert their DNA into our cellular structures, or we reproduce them. Is it possible that even on the plant side, there's an intelligence to plants that may be a controlling factor of who and what we are?
Do plants affect how human beings fit into the ecology of the planet? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's essentially. I mean, we kind of go around this world thinking like we're the smartest entity of the universe, and maybe there's a masterful manipulation, and we're all kind of in this together, the plants, the microbes, the macrobes, and all these sort of things. And so it's just kind of what is it, the soup, the primordial soup of life. And none of us is any more intelligent, but it seems to me like the plants are pretty smart.
Right. Okay. Intelligence comes in many different forms. Absolutely. We have a kind of intelligence that we value and state to be the highest form of intelligence, I think purely because that's the kind we have. But yes, all other living organisms, both those that are apparently aware and those that are apparently not, they are both underpinned by the same miraculous, unbelievable intelligence, that being the genes carried by those organisms. Those genes in every single living thing, down to the lowest jellyfish, if you like, they are all the absolute peak of the evolutionary process to this point. All of them are the optimization of that particular line of DNA, RNA, over at least 3,800 million years. So yes, absolutely, those things have a miraculous inherent intelligence, which can also be thought of as the anthropic principle a bit, i.e. things are as they are because they couldn't be any other way possibly. When you sort of asked me at the very beginning about some of the branches of science that you can rely on, and I said particle physics, yes, to do what it purports to do. What it cannot do is actually provide any external validity to itself. I mean, objective reality is actually metaphysical.